One of the best conversations that I have had in a long time about what happened at 1122 King Road in Idaho a year and a half ago was with Harvey Levin of TMZ fame. Harvey's a lawyer, and he has a long, long history of covering crime and justice. So imagine my surprise when he raised doubts about whether Bryan Kohberger could have pulled off that quadruple murder all by himself. He is not entirely convinced that a guy with no history of violent crime went floor to floor in a big house and killed 4 young people with only one knife. And Harvey says a jury might have a problem with that too.
Well, look, I mean, there is a lot of evidence here that links Bryan Kohberger to this crime. That said, I just do find it weird. And this is not to say that he did or didn't do it. But Ashleigh, somebody who has never committed a murder or, as far as we know, even a violent crime, going to a house that has 3 levels, 6 people inside and a dog, where he would go up to the 3rd floor, kill 2 people, go down to the 2nd floor, kill 2 more, knowing that there are other people in the house. And the only thing he's armed with is a knife, doing that with 6 people, never having committed a crime before, knowing that one of the people in the house is a guy who's much more athletic, bigger than him, who could have heard a scream when he killed the first 2 people, and he could have overpowered him. It's a little weird, don't you think?
Well, I was going to say you missed your calling as a defense attorney, but you didn't, because TMZ is really, really popular and successful, so you're doing just fine. But I will say this. I have a theory, Harvey Levin, and that is this. If he's guilty, and I have to preface, if he's guilty of this crime, he showed up thinking there'd be 5 girls. And he didn't expect a boy to be sleeping over, a very big boy, Ethan Chapin. And maybe, just maybe, that stunned him. He was overwhelmed, and the battle became pitched. And that was enough for him to say, after the 3rd victim, and then suddenly a very large 4th victim, that he needed to get out of there. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I hear you. But I do think that he knew that Ethan was around that house a lot, because he had stalked the house, if you believe the prosecutors, that they have numerous, they have evidence that he had gone there numerous times and just watched the house. So it sounds like he knew the lay of the land inside, which means he knew who was there. And Ethan's girlfriend was there, which is why he was there. And he slept over. So I don't know that he'd be oblivious to Ethan being there. But, you know, again, even if Ethan wasn't there, when he does this to the first person, you would assume there would be screams and that other people would wake up and see him. And unless he planned on taking everybody out of the house, somebody's going to ID this guy and it's game over. So, look, again, I'm not saying he didn't do it. I'm just saying the circumstances are boldly weird here, that he would think
boldly weird.
Get away with
yes. Yeah, I'm with you. I have always thought this. Like, if he's guilty, how is it that a PhD student in criminology could think that you could pull it off? But for the fact it's a party house, and maybe that was the equation. Any of the screaming is going to be written off as partying. And as it turns out, from some of the early affidavits, Dylan Mortensen said that she heard Kaylee, it sounded like she was playing with her dog. Likely she was being murdered. And then she heard Xana whimpering and someone saying, you know, it's okay, I'm here to help. And that Dylan didn't think anything of it because it's a party house and it's so noisy.
Well, okay, but it was also 4:30 in the morning when this happened. And usually that's not when the party is at high pitch. And secondly, I think he knew they were sleeping. I don't think he would have gone in the house if he thought everybody was awake, roaming around. So I think he went in knowing it was quiet. And I'm not so much talking about the neighbors as I'm talking about people in the house. Unless he felt he could take out 6 people, that there was a huge risk that the first person would scream loud enough that everybody else would wake up. They would ID him, even if they didn't overpower him, and they would know exactly who it is. They'd give the description to the police and be arrested in 12 hours. So, you know, I just don't buy the party house theory. even though it was a party house.
The DoorDash part. The DoorDash part is so perplexing because that DoorDash was on the back door or the front door, I'm not even sure which, at 4 o'clock in the morning. And the perp, be it Kohberger or someone else, depending, you know, was within minutes of that. It's astounding they didn't cross paths or at least see each other. Or maybe that was the opportunity, again, if he's guilty, that Kohberger saw as a chance to be in the house where nobody would suspect an odd guy walking through the house because DoorDash was there.
That's true, too. And look, and I understand that. And I don't want to just focus on this, Ashleigh, because there's a lot of evidence here. I mean, the DNA on the knife sheath, just the fact that he had said that he was hanging around that area because he liked looking at stars, even though it was cloudy, and he put himself right by the scene of the crime. You know, in addition to, you know, taking his cell phone with him, turning it on and off, as opposed to leaving it at home when it's on. I mean, that's kind of a basic thing, especially if you're studying criminal justice. So, you know, he screwed up a lot if he did it, but there's a lot of evidence that he did.
I mean, those are two massive rookie moves, right? Taking your cell phone with you and thinking you're smart enough that turning it off once you're driving. Yeah. And then number two, leaving the knife sheath behind. Because as we have come to understand, you know, the murders on the third floor happened first and the knife sheath was up there. So he would have been leaving the house without the knife sheath, and he left the, again, if he's guilty, the first murders, he left the sheath behind. So real rookie move. And let's talk a little more about that theory of yours about going 0 to 60 in your first murder, that it's very, very unlikely. In your special, in Strange and Suspicious, you do have some experts who actually say, maybe it's not that weird. Maybe somebody can go from 0 to 60 because spree killers do it all the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. And by the way, it's not a special. This is actually a series that's on the Fox stations around the country in the big markets. It's Monday through Friday. So how about that? Yeah. Yes, we had people. We have like LAPD, retired cop, private investigators, and others who said what you said, which is it is not necessarily unusual where people can create fantasies and then act out on the fantasy. That's true. Where I come from is this. My dad owned a liquor store, and I worked in the store when I was a kid. And I remember we used to have a lot of people coming in stealing things, stealing Playboy, stealing candy. And I remember talking to my dad about it. And we would talk about the fact that people who come in and they steal Playboys and steal candy and whatnot, that they keep graduating upward. And eventually some of them end up robbing banks. This would be like somebody robbing a bank in their first outing and skipping my dad's liquor store. And for some reason, the liquor store metaphor always has stuck with me. And it's odd to me that somebody would commit a crime of this magnitude with this many people, thinking that they could do it with just a knife in the middle of the night with a 3-level house. That's pretty damn bold. Even if you have fantasies, I'm not sure if somebody is smart, and he is smart, would say, I'm going to act on this fantasy because I think I can pull it off. It feels improbable.
Yeah, I mean, it is Capote-level violence. And I always like to say there are a lot of smart criminals out there, and they always think they're smarter than all of the crime solvers. And typically, they're not. One last quick question for you, Harvey Levin, because you know how much I adore you, and I also admire you. You've got such a great body of work, as well as your background in law. What's your over-under on this? What do you think is actually going to happen? I know the theories we've espoused here, but what do you really think is going to happen in Idaho?
Well, I mean, look, there is a lot of evidence linking this guy to the crime. So I haven't heard all of it, but when you look at the knife sheath, when you look at the DNA, when you look at the cell phone, when you look at him even acknowledging that he was around there, where you've got him essentially stalking that place, there is a lot of evidence here that could definitely convince a jury to convict this guy.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm going to do you a big solid here. It is called Strange and Suspicious. It's airing now, weekdays on Fox. And this particular episode is the one on Bryan Kohberger. You had me at hello, but you always do. I'm going to call you back, and we'll talk about Kohberger as it gets underway. Thanks, Harvey.
I love talking to you, Ashleigh.
Harvey used the word weird several times in our conversation. And come next summer, if just one juror feels the same way, weird, Kohberger might walk out of his trial through the front door instead of the back. It only takes one juror. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.